Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Sue Ellis-Saller, and I am from Spiritual Business Spotlight. And today I'm shining the light on Cody Edner. And he is an intuitive trainer. He's a psychic medium. He teaches meditation and spirituality. I'll let you introduce yourself. How about that,
Thank you,
Cody?
Sue. Well, thanks for having me. I would say I am an intuitive trainer. I think is one great thing to focus on. But I also teach meditation, of course, and that to me is the doorway into the intuitive arts, and teach healing and mediumship. And I've been practicing for over 30 years in this field of energy awareness and psychic or spiritual development, we could call it. So that's kind of my introduction.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. So,
Thanks.
they're over 30 years. Wow, what a rich history.
Yeah, I started when I was pretty young. I had a couple of kind of openings into the psychic experience or the psychic world that influenced me, and I was very interested in that side of things, and the side of energy or just different kind of paranormal experience. And we didn't have back then a lot of language for it, and there wasn't really a lot of places to go to study or learn. There was kind of a big myth, I think, that still can be out there that the psychic has a gift, and they're the gifted one, and that's the only person that can have it. So you either do or you don't. That's kind of a myth that we like to hold, even in sports. That the talent has a gift, and you either have it or you don't, which really negates the fact that those kinds of things have to be developed in some way. And so whether it is a athletic talent or a mental talent or a psychic talent, and we're all psychic really, uh, to start to put attention into it and learn some tools and learn how to practice, lets you develop that in yourself. And so that was my kind of question, is how can I develop my psychic abilities? I had that question as a teenager, and I happened to find a school when I was about 17 to
Oh,
18, and started training, learning how to meditate, learning how to get in touch with that sensitive side, the intuitive side, and learning how to kind of interpret those perceptions, and what's real and what's mine and what's someone else's, and what's it all mean. And there's all these questions that you have to kind of start with turning inward, and that's meditation, and kind of finding that center to then start to look at these things from. So it's been a journey, and I've really been practicing since then, and done this as a full-time, I probably since my early 20s. I've done this as full-time work.
wow.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because what you're saying is so true. Like, I hate to say back in the day, but we didn't have so much access to the information in the same way that we do now. We didn't have
Right.
Zoom classrooms. We didn't have the
We didn't have any
internet.
of this. No, back in the day, which is a really true. The classes I went to, I had to drive a half an hour to a place, and then go in and spend the evening in a class and drive a half hour home. And actually, I was in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and some classes I went to, I had to drive an hour and a half to get to, because
Oh,
they're
wow.
you know,
Yeah.
further away. So now the convenience and the ability to connect in this way has just opened it up to where, I teach some mediumship classes, which are kind of our postgraduate classes that I have people calling in from all around the world, to
Wow.
be a part of the class. And it's really wonderful to be able to have that kind of diversity now, and to have people just from so many different walks of life come together around this common kind of theme of connecting with energy and spirit and healing. It's a wonderful thing. So
Oh yeah, definitely. And like you were saying, a lot of people kind of shy away from it because they're just like, oh, I just get deja vu every once in a while, or my hands feel kind of warm when I see somebody who's sick, but I'm not really sure
Mhm.
that, I'm not that gifted kind of person. And
Right.
what you're saying is that, and what we know basically is that everybody has these gifts and they're latent and they can be developed in the same way you can develop muscles or
Right.
intelligence or whatever.
Right. I think even more than just that they're latent, I think they're part of who we really are. And so when we connect with those gifts and start to validate them, and it's not that we have to become the healer and do it for our livelihood. It's that that part of ourselves that is sensitive and intuitive, that can be the healer, that can interact in that world, is also the very creative part of ourselves. It's kind of the part that's really the spirit or the soul of the self. In fact, the word psychic just means of the soul, right? It's like soul essence or of the soul is kind of the root of that word. And so that's like this big umbrella kind of idea of all the things that you might do. Mysticism might be another word that's kind of an umbrella for the things that are in this realm of experience. And so to explore your psychic or intuitive spiritual abilities is to just explore that part of yourself. And for some people, they become a person who loves to read other people and talk about what they pick up. Other people love to heal. And other people, it just unlocks some creative part of themselves that they can feel more confident in, like, opening up and sharing in the world. So it doesn't have to be what we would call quote unquote psychic
Right.
in terms of how you use it. It's more of a recognition that you are that psychic. You are that person that behind it all has this energy, this soul, and this really untapped, in a way, potential or untapped kind of creative awareness or new ideas and new energy that you're here to bring to the world. And so part of it is about unlocking that part of yourself. And in many ways, when we teach someone, intuitive training or teach them how to use their psychic abilities, we don't really think of it like we're teaching them to be psychic. We more think of it like we're kind of reminding them of who they are, and that a person starts to become more of who they really are as they get in touch with that part of themselves. And that can play out just in normal conversations and interactions and relationships. And it really impacts and changes relationships when you start to see the energy dynamic side of what's going on in the world. So,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I love that you bring in this best self because this has been like kind of this theme, when you're
Hmm.
connecting with your best self, when you're meditating and you're getting in touch with, on the one hand, this infinite possibility,
Yes.
and the potential to be kind of anything and create anything you want, but then bringing that and grounding that back into your body and into your life and into your potential and possibilities, you
Right.
know, the shifts that you create with that are just phenomenal and life changing.
Yes, absolutely. And they're really life aligning. Like when you
Mhm.
start to come into that connectedness with yourself, and we have kind of a concept of connecting with like the God of your heart, like finding that part of you within that really speaks to what you're here to do, what you're here to kind of explore and be, and that's aligned with spirit. And when you start to express yourself and kind of create in the world from that, things line up in a particular way that tends to work in flow for that person. Like people's lives tend to unfold a little bit more in flow with a little bit less effort. There tends to be a little bit more a sense of meaning and connection in what you're doing because you're connected to that deeper place within. And certainly that's our goal. It's not to make someone more psychic per se. It's to make someone more aligned with themselves and their path. But a part of that, of course, is just happens to be all these spiritual abilities, all the clairs, as you say. That it's kind of a term I've heard lately. Back in the day, we didn't really use some of these terms. I mean, we talked about clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience. I just had never heard anybody call it like the clairs, but that's really speaks right to what we're talking to, is all those senses in us that we either feel it relative to energy, or we hear spirit, or we see it, and that as we tap into how to kind of listen to those, it changes both our inner and outer worlds, really.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think anybody who's working in the fields that we do are, can attest to just how much positive change it brings into
Yes.
your life. Yeah. And it's not necessarily, I think that people have this, kind of TV guided visualization of what a psychic is and what a psychic does, and that they're, scammers and trying to pull a fast one on people. And there are those people in the world, I can say totally without hesitation that there are.
Right.
But there are so many people who just want to help for a moment, just like, oh, okay, I see this and that and the other thing that's going on, or they're giving validation to somebody, or they're helping that person to open up to their creative self
Right.
or their best self. And
Yes.
so, yeah. And like you said too, when you think about it, if you're open to saying, yeah, I do have those feelings of knowing, or sometimes, yeah, I do hear exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, or smell my grandmother's perfume when it's her
Right.
birthday or something like that, or when I'm really depressed and I need support.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so those
Yeah.
kind of things are just so common, but I think that they're feared on the one
Right.
hand, um, and overlooked on the other.
Yes. And they're oftentimes discouraged in our
Yeah.
youth, or invalidated. And so much of what we have to address in bringing someone back to that center and connection with these abilities is how to release some of those blocks that are invalidation or fear or even punishment. Sometimes we got in trouble for saying too much or knowing too much at a young age, and seeing things that maybe weren't supposed to be talked about. And that's not an uncommon experience for many people as they start to delve into opening back up, that they'll kind of go through a few memories where they turned themselves down or got turned down
Oh,
by the
yeah.
world. So there's a bit of a pressure to suppress some of these awarenesses and not let them kind of run their course and open up, and so we have to go back through that. There's really two sides to that kind of media portrayal. In my mind, there's the side that says that psychics, that it's not real, that they're scammers. There's the disbelievers and the prove it crowd. And the other side is the side that says, um, someone says, "Oh, you're psychic. Well, what am I thinking, or what's my future, or what's," and and that kind of idea of a psychic that gets portrayed in maybe movies or the media, that they are gonna see the future, or know, is not necessarily the primary expression of that ability. So, in a way, what we teach people how to do is to read the aura, to read your energy field, to read and reflect back where you are, maybe where your energy is creating and where it's stuck, to help
Mhm.
you get unstuck and moving on your path. So there's so many times where there are things that we kind of know that we have an ability or an aptitude for, or that we want, but they're in the background a little bit. There's something that we can't really see ourselves doing, but we know it's there somewhat. And in a reading, it's like someone's neutrally pointing out in you things that they see in you, and that connection gets made when it's something that you kind of knew about yourself already. and you can get through that block. You can change your energy by being read. And so whether it's a reading or a healing where we directly work to change your energy, it's really about taking you deeper into alignment with yourself, opening up into your abilities to create and to be more of who you are than it is about reading a future. Partly
Right.
because part of the foundation of the teaching that I teach is a belief that you create your future. You co-create. So if we read your future as if it's set in stone, then we've taken away that idea that you could create it. So
Right.
we might read your future more in the sense that, well, here's the way the energy is flowing. This would be the potential. But if you change, then you're going to change that
Right.
direction, that future. And that's more helpful. I mean, our goal is to empower someone to change their energy, to create their vision, to find their vision. Sometimes that's the hardest part for us, is to really find what we want to align with, and then to create it. So we're all about teaching someone through this method of meditation and connection with the spiritual abilities, then to ask that next question, which is, what am I really here for? What am I really about? What do my energies want to get involved in and create? And that's the goal, is that we would have that freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I found even in the light worker community as of late, probably starting in the last quarter of the year last year, a lot of people are shifting into a totally new direction, or they're just like, I've been a light worker for so long, and now my focus is has taken a turn. And
Hmm.
so everybody's, kind of a little bit open and a little bit like we were talking before the show, I think like there's this huge change happening. And so we're on the
Yes.
front lines of this change, kind of trying to, I don't want to say trying to influence it, but trying to influence it. So we're,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a shift in the energy that's happening on the planet, and these shifts happen. This one really, I would say, there's kind of a spiritual renaissance happening, where there's this new opening into a new level of awareness and consciousness, and there's this bigger picture that everybody's starting to really see. As a teacher, I've always kind of focused on the individual. My thought is, you change your space, and that begins to change the world. And here's some tools to kind of heal yourself and change your space. But there's enough people doing that now that it's like this change is happening uh, throughout the planet, in the world, this kind of shift in energy. And there's lots of different ways that people have been seeing it and expressing it over the years, and it's something that you're right, we are on the forefront of, um, which, there's some excitement in that, to be the kind of the early adopters of new spiritual awareness. And then there's always pushback. It's not the easiest path to be the
right.
first one, to be the first healer in your town, or the first psychic, in your group of friends, the first person to kind of wake up to this different way of seeing in the world. And so, we like to work more in groups. It's great to find that community that you connect with, that validates you and supports you and accepts you in that new endeavor. And ultimately, as everybody kind of opens up to this type of awareness and validates it, it starts to spread. If you start to really change your energy, there may be a little resistance or pushback in the beginning, but everybody tends to start to come around after a while and say, "What? You're different. Your energy's higher. You're a little happier, or you seem more at peace. What are you doing?" And there's always that time when it comes back around, where suddenly that shift becomes more apparent to the world, and there's a lot of people that are looking for that. right?
Oh,
And then we
definitely.
become that teacher to the world, even if we're not doing it as a profession. We're being that thing in the world that's aligned and at peace and focused with energy and creating. And that's how it spreads, really.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And I think you make a really important point that you can open up to being a healer or working with your psychic abilities or, meditation, um, doing all of this work. You don't have to do it professionally. You can just
Right.
do it as a self-improvement or for your own edification,
Yes.
Yeah,
Right. For sure. Over my years of experience, I would say probably 80% of the people do it for their own just growth and self-improvement and exploration. I mean, I've had, I remember years ago I was doing a meditation class, and this one gentleman in the class kind of stood out to me as different. It was the first night of class, and so on the break I went over and introduced myself directly, said, "Well, what's your story?" And he was a priest on sabbatical, and he just wanted, he knew, there's all these different places that we find ourselves in the world where there's what we're doing is right in front of us, but there's this thing that we start to notice in the background. So maybe as a nurse or a massage therapist or a clergy, or you start to see that, hey, there's something more in the background that nobody's talking about, right? There's something more that seems to be, it shows itself every once in a while, these little kind of openings to spirit, that's that deeper thing. And so we get people like that come to class and say, I'm like, he wasn't going to leave the priesthood. He just was looking for an answer to these things he was experiencing when he worked with people, where there was this deeper kind of thing emerging.
right.
Years ago, I taught a class here in Colorado. I had a, a number of psychologists in it and therapists, and they were learning these tools and this other side of energy awareness and gently starting to kind of integrate it into their worldview and their practice. And when I started in the early 80s doing this work, you probably couldn't find many therapists out there that would recognize energy work and talk to that side of it. Maybe in the hypnotherapy community, but this kind of straight line. But nowadays, you can find many different therapists that also incorporate an awareness of energy and that kind of perspective. And so it's really expanded over the last 30 years. It's kind of amazing to see.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because it's I mean, even Reiki is in hospitals now. They're
Right.
understanding that, positive energy can have a positive effect on people. And
Yeah.
so or the preemies who have the kangaroo care, and just really opening up to the
Right.
fact that it's a holistic treatment
Yes.
of a
And there's
person.
therapeutic touch and different kinds of quantum touch in hospital. I have a funny story about that. When I was in about 21, I got into an auto accident. I got hit by a drunk driver,
Oh gosh.
and yeah, head-on collision, and that that part of it was just its own thing. But when I got taken to the hospital, it was some saint something hospital, right? It was kind of a Catholic hospital, I guess, and there were these plaques in the elevator that said absolutely no hand, like energy work or hand. There was these plaques that said you could not do that in the hospital.
Really?
Yeah. And so this would have been 86 maybe, this was, and now it's actually in the hospital. And I've worked with a number of people who take this energy awareness work and then go into things like hospice care,
Mhm.
and like being with someone in that kind of space, and that's a real powerful space. Or work as nurses and work in healing fields where it's both the conventional medicine kind of intertwining with some holistic style of medicine. That's happening more and more.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, even myself, was just working on a woman who got out of the hospital and she had a wound that had sepsis, and
Mm,
that's why she was in the hospital. And then she came home, and I helped her with the healing stages of that with doing energy work. And she was like, wow, it's so much smaller. And just like, and
yes.
so for not only for transitional work like end of life or palliative work, when you're doing pain management, because I found that to be like holy moly,
Oh, right. Very
yeah,
powerful. Yes.
very, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But
Yeah.
also working with people on recovery or
Hmm.
on, like you're saying, like not only physical health but mental health, and is somebody blocking their healing or recovery
Right.
energetically as well.
Right. Yes. And so, I mean, end of life and beginning of life are really powerful inflection
Gosh,
points for spirit, right? So we used to also practice like spiritual midwives would be a concept where someone would be kind of working the energy around birth. And that's a beautiful thing to
definitely.
experience and be a part of. So there's so many different ways that bringing spirit into the mix, bringing that level of intuitive awareness into the mix, uh, not only just kind of deepens the experience, I think, and makes it that much more interesting to see that what's happening kind of in the
Right,
energy world, to open up to that. Um, but it brings healing and positive energy to even to death, even to that
mhm.
experience is just a miracle when spirit is recognized in
Yeah,
that space. I
yeah.
had a really early experience with that. My grandfather, he came to live with us late in his life, and he passed away. He's like 93 or 94, and he passed away just in a very natural way, right? And so he was kind of fading and had gone into like a semi comatose state. And so I came into his room and I was going to give him a healing and kind of a last rites type thing, but just kind of a help him as a spirit gather his energy and be ready for his next step. And he had been in this kind of coma, not recognizing or talking to anybody for a couple of days. And I came in and started to work on him, and I connected with him as a spirit, and I saw that he was kind of away from his body. And so I brought him back to his body to help him gather everything up and realign his energy. And as I did that, he came in and he said, "Cody, is that you?" He
Oh,
totally recognized me and said hello. And then I did the healing, and then he left. And he didn't pass right at that moment, but that really completed the energy cycle. And that was pretty powerful. And I was in my early 20s. I was just kind of getting into this work, but that really kind of took it to another level of recognition and just how powerful it is. Yeah.
right. Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Imagine. So, and you're teaching this. You keep mentioning we and
We,
teaching and
because I know I say we because I have a partner. So David Gandelman and I have teamed up, and we have a podcast. So our podcast is Energy Matters. And then out of that, we teach intuitive development. So in Energy Matters podcast, we do much like this. We just talk to people that are in the wellness field or spiritual development field. And so yes, we are starting a new class that comes around every couple of years. So it's been a couple of years since we did our last one, and we graduated a group, and so we're starting a new one on March 24th. So coming up really soon,
yeah,
and we're doing an informational night, a free informational night on Tuesday, March 10th. and
Okay.
that's at like 5 p.m. Pacific time. And of course, this I know in the podcasting world, uh, it may
It'll be in the
takes a
note.
while to get them out. We do that too. We have a few that are, that are well overdue. But if people do happen to hear this after March 10th and they're interested, then of course they can contact us and we can send the intro as a free download to listen to so they could get a feel for it. But yeah, we're really excited about it. It's on Tuesday nights starting March 24th, and it's level 1. It's 3 months long. So we do kind of a, to learn to learn this psychic stuff and open up actually doesn't take as long as you might think. So, you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, I could never become, and it's like, yeah, you can. In a couple months or a couple intensive weekends, you can become like that. But it takes a while to integrate it and to have the space to safely practice it and not
Right.
kind of get blown out or not get just kind of where you lose it because it's overwhelming, because you're opening up to a world of awareness that's really big. And there are a few things that you need to kind of know about how to interpret and interact with that world, especially because a lot of it in energy awareness involves interacting with other people. You start to become aware of what's going on energetically in the world with you and other people. And so there's a learning curve to that, of course. And there's an part of that learning curve isn't new information. It's that it's transformational information. You have to have time to transform and integrate. And so the way we've created our program is really with that in mind, right? So we're not just throwing a bunch of tools at you and then saying, well, here you go out and see what happens. Because I know what happens is they all get forgotten. They never get integrated. So what we've done is we have 3-month levels or modules, and then a couple of months break of where we continue with a practicum, where we practice and integrate, and we have time to kind of integrate what we're learning and interact with it and get experience with it. Because as you gain experience with it, then you're ready for the next step to go to the next level, let's say. So we kind of do a 3-month more intensive where we're working a couple times a week and we're doing lots of different things. And then we have a 2-month where, okay, now practice all that and integrate it. And then we'll do the next 3 months. So with that kind of pattern in mind, the program's about 18 months to 2 years, depending on how long of the breaks we create in between there's 4 levels basically. So 4 3-month levels. So that's a year. And then we sometimes do a 2-month integration time or a 3-month. And some of it also just depends on the calendar when it's falling. Um, so that kind of will unfold, but the program itself is very solid in not only teaching you this stuff, but giving you the time and the direction to integrate it, because it becomes a part of how you live in the world. That's the goal. So the energy awareness is something to develop in yourself, and then that's kind of, you become that person that recognizes that side of things in the world and brings that level of communication to others, in the world. So when we read someone, from that media view, being the psychic is like woo woo. We're reading whatever the future, telling them, all these crazy things, and that's really not what a reading is. A reading is where I would sit down and connect with your energy and start to see that part of you, and what we would describe in the teaching as um, saying hello to you as a spirit, to that deeper part of you that's not the ego personality that we have to show the world to survive and feel safe, but what's behind that, this deeper, really powerful, actually, but sensitive part of you gets recognized in a reading and validated. And that's a really powerful experience, both to be the one to give that and to be the one to receive it. It's really powerful for both sides of that experience. And so we teach people how to read, not ultimately to become readers, but to learn how to really see and say hello to someone as a spirit, we would say, or as an energy. How might be another way to say it,
Right. But that's a tool that can come in handy in so many different situations,
Absolutely.
in the workplace, with your family, in greater society, where you're looking at people from a completely different perspective than that ego
Right.
meeting, just
Yes.
that superficial, you know, um,
Yeah.
then you'll see.
Absolutely. And one of the practices in learning to read is learning how to become neutral, to find neutrality, and that's something that takes a bit of practice to find
Well,
that
like, whew, that's
really
hard
neutral.
sometimes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. But that's oftentimes the thing between us and a deep, meaningful connection with someone, right? Is that non-neutrality or some form of a judgment or a criticism or whatever. And it's not personal. It arises from our conditioned mind, right?
Mhm.
So we're learning how to recognize that and get past that. And so this kind of work ultimately does deepen those relationships and connections, and we seek to connect at that deeper level when we see someone beyond that surface energy. Yeah.
Right, right. And with neutrality comes understanding. With that understanding,
Right.
then comes that
Some
different way.
compassion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And with neutrality, um, oftentimes when you can find that neutrality and you're communicating with someone, especially say in a reading sense about what's going on, it opens the door for them to really have the communication, not as a personal attack, but then they can use anything that's valuable in it, and they don't have to use there's no obligation. It's neutral, and here's what I see, and so people tend to be more open to receive communication when you are coming towards them with neutrality and some compassion, of course, but
Right,
neutrality seems to be the key. Yeah.
right. Well, as a reader, though, it's essential because,
Right.
you
Absolutely.
can't come into a reading with judgment or with, because people, I've in some circumstances they're using us, as the therapist or as the
Right.
person that they're going to for the help. And so what we have to do is not put them in a place where they feel like us wagging our finger at them or
Exactly.
judging them, so that they can open their energy up. Because
Hmm.
even, you were saying earlier about the therapist and everything coming to your classes, they're learning then how to open people up, so then those issues and those blockages and those, um, whole even the bright beautiful parts are more evident, but also the blockages and what the shifts need to be also become a lot more evident as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you create space for them to kind of both decide for themselves, but then to actually take that step, right?
yeah,
So the neutrality kind of creates a space for someone, and that's a real powerful part of it, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because we all need somebody who can hold space. I think that's a
Right.
lost art in and of itself, is that
Right.
just allowing a person to open up.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of things and concepts and tools and awarenesses like that are explored in this intuitive training. It is about both learning how to get into your own energy space and awareness to be safe to open up as
Mhm.
the reader, because it's difficult to open up as the receiver or the readee, we might call it. It's also difficult to open up and remain open in front of someone. It's just as vulnerable to be the reader as to be the readee.
Yeah.
But that's the beautiful thing about it. It is learning how to be comfortable in a space of, say, a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of not knowing, a little bit of surrender, and just seeing what's there rather than forcing what the mind might want to force, to feel safe or in control. So there's a lot of deep learning that happens. We go really deep, and that's why it takes time. That's why we didn't want to just do a weekend seminar, and a weekend intensive, which we could do. I mean, I could teach you a lot in a weekend, but I couldn't help you integrate it or go through the growth process of what happens when you open up all that stuff. So
Oh, yeah.
that we hold space for a person throughout that training. I mean, that's the goal, is we're holding, and that's what we're doing, is we're creating and holding a space where it's safe to open up and then go through all the things that one has to go through when you do open up at that deep level.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think it's imperative too to understand that it's a journey. Like you said, I
Yes.
mean, you can learn a lot in a master class or in a weekend or in a month-long series or whatever. But the whole thing is that, I mean, I teach a tarot class where I'm just like, oh, no way, I'm not going to teach a 6-week tarot class. I'm going to teach a year long. I'm going to bring symbolism into it. I'm going to bring
Right.
numerology and every aspect of it, because there's so much more to it than just meditate, open yourself, allow the messages to come through. It's just like you said, they
Right.
have to integrate and practice and have that whole safe space
Right.
to
Exactly.
create those shifts within themselves. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And you have to have time to have the experience and then figure out what your questions are. You have to have time to then ask those questions. So as you go through the experience, then you start to get to, what is my question, or what do I need to know, or what scares me. And if we just do it in this real condensed form, you get all the techniques, but you don't get that space to grow into them and ask the questions that you need to ask.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a very complete program that we've created that isn't just David and I. We teach the some of the lectures, and we're there holding space on that level, but we have about 8 to 10 other psychic teachers to help people one-on-one, to help them, through their practicums and all the different things. So it takes a team really to guide this kind of a program that we're proposing. So we do have that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, David was telling me too, were you also a teacher was there a school of psychic?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So when I kind of had my first opening, I went and got a reading actually, and I really had this kind of awakening during the reading to a sense of my own psychic energy and abilities. But I was only 14 at that time. But then a couple of years later, I found a school where I could learn meditation and psychic energy awareness and stuff. And I actually got a reading at that school then, before I started taking classes. And that reading was really profound for me in one sense. It wasn't so much what was said verbally that stands out in my mind today. I don't really remember what was said. I remember feeling like I was being kind of connected with and seen in a way that I'd never felt before. But at the end, the reader said, "Oh, would you like a healing?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, I was game. I had no idea. I was like 17 or something. And so he kind of put his hand up and he started to just do this little moving of my energy. But when he did that, I felt the movement. I felt this rush of energy come up through me, and then I saw flashes of color, which I'd never seen energy. But I just suddenly opened up and saw, and that at that moment, I was really like, "Whoa! I want to pursue this. I want to learn more about this." I would like to, and in a way, I think at some point I had a thought that I would like to learn how to do that in myself, for myself, right? I want to be able to just go into that space on my own. And so that place was called the Berkeley Psychic Institute, and
Ah,
I was in Sacramento at the time. They had schools all over Northern California, And so that's where I first started to train, and ultimately I ran one of the schools when
Oh,
I was about
wow.
24. I ran a school for them for about 6 years, and then I moved to a different wellness center energy working organization called the Sklepion Healing Center, and I was there for a number of years running their clairvoyant division. I got into their mediumship training work and learned how to work with the mediums as well. Um, so I was kind of doing that, all of that work, full time from, I don't know, 86, 80, well, 84 was when I started taking classes, but as a teacher from like 88 to about 2001. And then I went off just on my own, and I've been teaching courses on my own and started a podcast. And I do readings and healings, do private sessions for sure. But my main focus has always been teaching. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, and that's so important right now for especially like we were talking about earlier, just with the shift and everything. But I think that people are opening up to this more, and so it's since the door has been ajar, it's kind of pushing the door a little bit farther and farther
Yes.
open every time.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely opening, and it's definitely just, I don't know, it's becoming more accepted. Many of the concepts, the sense that there is energy behind everything, that you can kind of sense it, and even the sense of being kind of grounded, or being present and being centered. All these ideas that were very much kind of meditative, esoteric ideas are now in our general language. Oftentimes, we kind of talk about people as if, in sports you might hear someone say, oh, he's really grounded or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, that's a concept we teach that kind of comes out of energy awareness, and what it means to be kind of connected and present versus kind of scattered and uh, disconnected in many ways, to the
right,
body or to the planet. So I've seen that over the years. I've seen that development. I remember teaching courses, 30 years ago, and you would ask a group, well, how many has, heard of grounding or being grounded? And nobody had necessarily heard of that or done it. And now you go into a group and everybody's heard of it, right? So it's
right,
just kind of a whole different uh, starting point for everybody. It's like already kind of there, which is great. I mean, it's much more open. You don't have to kind of convince people that it's there. You just start teaching them,
right,
about how to access it, and they're already kind of in the mind that it's there.
right,
Because I've dealt with, of course, many skeptics over the years, and many people who want you to prove it to them. Um, which is kind of a funny thing. In one way, my teacher always said, "Well, never play the game of prove it, because you're going to play by their rules, and then you can't win." Because any psychic experience is an individual inside experience that you have to have. So if I'm trying to prove it to you and you just deny your own experience, I
right,
obviously can never prove it to you, because that is the experience. It's a personal. It'd be like someone say, well, prove to me that there's a such thing as love. And I say, well, look inward and feel for love. And they go, well, I don't feel anything. Well, I guess there's no such thing then, right? Until
right,
you feel it, it's not going to be real. So teaching someone about that part of themselves is not something to convince them of. It's just something to show them or point the way to in themselves. And either they have the experience and can recognize it as something real or something to pursue, or they don't. And
right,
um, and but there is a little bit of an interesting thing there, because of the suppression of these abilities and because of the invalidation. Sometimes someone's experiencing the ability, but they don't have the language for it. So
right,
years ago, I had this gentleman in class. It was kind of a breaking the ice type class to just address the skepticism that people might have. And And so this is an older gentleman. Well, he was probably my age now, or even in his mid 40s, that came to class, and we were doing some kind of experiment, like exercise to connect with the psychic ability. And as we did it, he participated. He was great. He was very skeptical, but he participated. And then as we were going around the room talking about it, he said, well, I suddenly realized that thing that you were describing and that we were playing with, I've always called that my common sense. And I always wondered why nobody else had it. I was like, no, that's the psychic ability. You're more psychic than you realize. Um, and, and it's not that nobody else had it, but that nobody was kind of validating it. So then it seems like nobody, if we're not talking about it, then nobody has it, right?
Right.
And so that was a real opening for him. I mean, it was a real epiphany. Like, oh my gosh, this is like me being intuitive, and not everybody else is open or operating at that level, because many people have it turned off. And he connected with a whole part of himself that he'd always kind of had to deny or make an excuse for, call it something it wasn't. And
Right.
and so we have a lot of things like that. When we start to explore this, we start to realize, oh, I've had this all along. I just didn't recognize it for what it is, or nobody validated it for what it is. So sometimes I've maybe felt like I was crazy because I had those awarenesses or feelings, or that I was just way off base, and I would invalidate myself for having those thoughts or feelings. And when you start to open up in this part of yourself, so many of those things you'll get validation for. Go, oh, I wasn't crazy.
Well, half the time I'm always like, I don't know if
Right. I know. I
I'm
know.
I'm a big
Yeah.
doubter myself. Sometimes
Yes.
I'm like, did that just happen? Even to this day, despite the fact that I'm totally engulfed in this is my life and everything, but there's still situations where you're just like, wow, that was so profound. Like I had to have made that up. That just
Right.
wouldn't have happened that way.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. It still happens. It's still, it arises from the mystery. And so it
Mm.
still has that moment where we don't see all the connections and our mind just can't make sense of it. And so then we're like, well, I don't know. That can't be. Um, so there is a fair amount of just having to kind of have enough experiences with it to then go, well, yeah, it's happened. This is the 100th time. So
Yep.
maybe I'll trust it this time. Yeah.
And then you just go, thank you, spirit. You
Right. And
know?
then you can move to that openness of acceptance of it rather than that doubting and kind of struggle with the skeptic in the own mind, because there is that as
Oh
well.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, one of the things too is just, this ongoing battle, and I'm sorry, I'm keeping you forever, but the ongoing battle between science and what we don't know yet. And
Right.
so, part of me wants to, track, record, um, verify, prove, get all of the data lined up.
Right.
And then there's this other part that's just like be open, allow, enjoy, show gratitude, and roll with it, And
Yeah.
so between those two areas, and I know that they're melding them a lot more lately. Uh,
Yes. I think that's a beautiful thing that I've seen over the years, is that so many of the awarenesses that come from, or so much of the information, let's say, that comes from energy awareness and the way we see the world is being actually validated by science now. And especially in the field of, the brain and meditation and what happens. So the things that I might see energetically as a reader and say, oh, here's what's happening when you meditate. Here's what I see happening in your energy system. And now you're hearing studies that support that. Oh yeah, this is what changes in your brain
right.
and in your mood, and ultimately it reflects to your energy system. So that's been a wonderful thing to watch unfold, and I think it's only going to get more,
Hopefully.
grow, because
Yeah.
there's so much study happening now with it. And yeah, that's really really awesome to get that validation. And there is a part of growing in your intuitive awareness where you kind of have to prove it to yourself. You kind of have to go through that to trust it. I mean, otherwise, why would you, right? So there's a such thing as a healthy skepticism.
Right.
The thing that doesn't work is when the skepticism isn't really skepticism anymore. It's a decision you've already made that it's not
Right.
true, right? So now you're just trying to prove an
Prove
assumption
it.
you already
Yeah.
have. And many skeptics who are calling themselves skeptics actually aren't skeptics. They've already decided it's untrue, and all they're trying to do is prove that it's untrue.
Right.
And they're struggling with proving that it's untrue, which is
Right.
kind of funny, you know.
Oh,
So a true skeptic is open to the experience, and then the skepticism or the little bit of critical mind comes in with interpreting what that means. But if you're not open to the experience, then you're not actually a skeptic. You're just closed. You're just
right.
closed-minded. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, and it's really interesting too, because, there's no way that somebody else can get inside of your perceptive
right,
experience. And so when you're working with a client and you feel these blocks or issues or shifts or something like that, there's no way that they could actually experience that. And so for them, for us, it's miraculous. And for them, they're cut off from it,
right,
you
yeah,
know,
hmm,
and unless they're actually experiencing it, like you said, experiencing it themselves, and they're just not fully, in command of the right terminology or the way to express it to other people. But I mean, everybody walks into a room, and I think it's just part of our, you can feel the energy of a
right,
room. You can
yes,
feel the energy of especially big energies like fear or excitement. Like if I go to a race or something like that, holy cow, it's just like, you almost get high on the energy there.
right, yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that it's just, kind of grounding that in our senses and in our common language, and opening it up to being normal.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, having language for it is a big part of it because it is a kind of an inward journey that you're having as an individual. And if you don't have a language to express it or, that other people can understand, it's hard to validate some of what happens. And so the more it is kind of opened up in a way that we can talk about it, the more real it can become. And that's definitely part of, I think, the shift that has been happening over the last, well, more than 30 years. It goes back much further than that. But the last fair amount of time, there has been this kind of new language of spiritualism and mysticism and metaphysics kind of growing. And it's always been there a little bit. I teach mediumship, and of course one of the most famous mediums was Edgar Casey, and that was way back when, right? And
Oh
but
yeah.
that was a very um very powerful voice in the world. Like he did so much to kind of validate information that comes from the other side, you know.
Right.
And there have been many others, but he's just one that jumps out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny though, because you're coming from the California mindset where it was open and something that you had access to. I come from Indiana, that's like the north part of the Bible Belt,
Right.
kind of. So it was just like
Yes.
when we got the bell booking candle, with tarot cards and spell books and everything, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Satan's coming into our town,
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, but we're just lucky in this day and age that we can openly explore this, and that there are so many resources like yourself available to us to be able to, you know, like I said, explore it and
Hmm.
practice it and really, you know, hit the ground running with all of this.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even where I was in California, there wasn't that, well, I think the place I went was probably one of the very few places that where you could get direct instruction, about it. And I had had a reading before that, and I had had some experience with, I'd got a cassette tape for meditating on the chakras and tried that. And of course, my first experience with trying to meditate, having no real instruction, was that I really did try. And so like got really tense, and then I
Uh,
got frustrated with it, right? So there are, there's so many resources nowadays where you don't have to get an audio tape. You can just get a download from any number of places with guided meditation that leads you into working on energy and chakras and opening up and all kinds of stuff. It's just so open right now. This is wonderful. It's just a wonderful thing to see happen. And it's always amazing to me how many people are both have had some kind of a psychic experience, but we don't talk about it, and how are who are open to it right now. It's very much opening up. But it seems like, having done this work over the years, that um, everybody's had some kind of a unexplained experience with
yeah.
energy or spirit, that they'll come around and say, I had this experience once, and they'll describe it to, wanting an answer, like, what was it? Or some validation. It's almost like everybody has one of those. But there was never permission to talk about it because it was, of the devil, or there was fear around it, or some kind of taboo or superstition around it. And now we're able to, express our feelings more, and also those types of experiences, and not be ostracized for it, or find the right people to share it with. Now we can do that, which maybe we were isolated a lot before,
Oh,
in
yeah.
different communities, for sure, isolated in our own little bubble of experience that we really didn't have a way to share or articulate or get feedback for. And now we can. And
Right.
I think that's just what, one of the things that I would say spirit needs in order to grow is, it needs to be seen. So you need to kind of be seen for where you are and who you are, and it needs to be validated. So in a reading, really, we're seeing a person and validating them, and we all need that. We all need that moment where someone sees that thing in us and can validate it, and then we can usually take a step where we can integrate it and grow.
Right.
And so that's a really important part of the process, and that's happening now. Yeah,
Right. Right.
pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo. So your class, again, it starts on March 24th, and it's every Tuesday at 5 p.m. And that's Pacific
Pacific time.
time.
Yes.
And it'll be intuitive training level 1. And that is at energymattersacademy.com. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you go to energymattersacademy.com, that is our website that has our podcast and everything. There's a link on there that says courses. And so if you click through that, down at the bottom of that page is this course, and you can get on our interest list,
Okay.
um, and or sign up, and you can get on our email list, and just let us know if you have questions or you want to learn more. Then we're happy to talk with you. And then we also have our introductory class, which will probably be out before this is out, but you can certainly get that. It's just a free introduction that David and I are going to do. And we also have a podcast. Our latest podcast we did was actually just David and I talking about intuitive training, and that's up
Oh,
on the
okay.
site as well. Yeah, so usually we do this format where we interview guests, but on occasion we just get on and chat with each other about some topics. So we have probably 4 or 5 of those on our podcast site as well.
Okay. And that is no, that's not that's Energy Matters podcast, right?
Well, so we just use energymattersacademy
Okay.
.com as our website, and you can get to all of our stuff from there. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. So, Cody, I want to thank you for your time and your energy and your expertise and for sharing with us so openly today. I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sue. I was really excited to get to come on your show and share some of this information and energy, and it's always exciting. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So, everybody, again, this is Cody Edner, and you can find his work at energymattersacademy.com. He also has his own work where you can book a session with him at intuitivevision.net. Is that correct?
Yeah. So intuitive
Okay.
vision is my kind of business, and David has his, David Gandelman, and then we just came together to do the Energy Matters podcast. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, everybody, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you soon. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.